Hello, my friends and my colleagues and my students. I hope that everyone is doing well and feeling healthy and safe and peaceful. Today, I will talk about an important clinical issue, which is fluid and electrolyte balance and fluid and electrolyte management. Of course, fluid and electrolyte management is a textbook by itself, and but I will just put or highlight in some important points which are of clinical relevance. Because there are many mistakes done in clinical practice in the fluid and electrolyte management of patients, whether in the emergency rooms or in the medical or surgical wards, or in the ICU or in the CCU or other acute medical settings. We all know that fluids in the body, that the body or the human body is mostly formed of water. Two-thirds of the weight of the human body is water. Two-thirds, that's 65 to 70%. This is an important fact in human physiology. And two-thirds of this water is in the intracellular compartment, and one-third is in the extracellular compartment. And there is what we call fluid compartments inside the body. And we have three major fluid compartments in the human body, which are in balance with each other. And this is what's meant by fluid balance. That's keeping the different major body fluid compartments in balance with each other and in equilibrium during health and when there is a disease process threatening the body. And these three major fluid compartments are the intracellular and the extracellular, divided into two: the interstitial fluid compartment and the intravascular fluid compartment. And actually there is another compartment belonging to the extracellular fluid compartment, which is the transcellular compartment. The extracellular fluid compartments are, as I mentioned, include the interstitial fluid, which is the fluid present in the interstitial tissue and in between the cells, and this, or sometimes we call it extracellular extravascular. And we have the extracellular intravascular compartment, which forms most of the extracellular fluid compartment, and this is the includes fluids in the blood vessels, which is the plasma, and fluid inside the lymph vessels, which is the lymph. So these, the plasma and the lymph, form the intravascular fluids. And then we have the transcellular fluids, which are the ocular fluids, the fluid present in the anterior and posterior chamber of the eyes, and they are in balance together, the ocular fluids, and the cerebrospinal fluid, which runs inside the spinal cord, that's inside the, and of course inside the brain, in the ventricles of the brain and the aqueducts of the brain. So this is the fluid running inside the central nervous system, the cerebrospinal fluid. So the cerebrospinal fluid and the ocular fluid forms what we call the transcellular compartment, which is the third subdivision of the extracellular fluid compartment. So we have the intracellular fluid, which forms most of the bulk of the body water, and then we have the extracellular, interstitial, intravascular in the blood vessels and the lymph, and transcellular fluids in the eye, the ocular fluid, and inside the cavity of the CNS in the spinal cord and the brain, which is the cerebrospinal fluid. These are the different different fluid compartments which are in balance with each other, and the body tries to keep the balance across the cell membranes between the intracellular compartment on one hand and the extracellular compartment on the other hand. So this is the fluid compartments of the body, and the fluids are actually in balance with what we call the electrolytes, which are also inside the cells and outside the cells. And the major electrolytes in the human body are the sodium, the potassium, and the chloride. And the electrolytes, they might be cations or anions. Those which are positively charged, we call them the cations, and those which are negatively charged, we call them the anions. And the major extracellular cation, which is osmotically active, is sodium. So sodium is the most common extra or prevalent extracellular cation, osmotically active and responsible for maintenance of the or regulation of the body water volume and status between the extracellular and the intracellular compartments, together with potassium, because potassium is the main intracellular cation. So the main intracellular cation is potassium, and the main extracellular cation is sodium, and the main intracellular anion is phosphate, and the main extracellular anion is chloride, which is negatively charged, the Cl minus. Together with, of course, the negatively charged protein molecules, which also act as anions, both inside the cells, the intracellular proteins, which are also act as intracellular anions, and the extracellular proteins like the plasma proteins, which also act as extracellular anions. So this is the difference between the anions and the cations, but both of them, they are electrolytes. And as I mentioned, the major electrolytes inside the body, generally extra and intra, are sodium, potassium, chloride, bicarbonate, calcium, phosphate, and magnesium. But the most important among those electrolytes, they are all important, but the most important, which play a role in fluid regulation and the balance between the intra and the extracellular compartment, and also in the membrane potential, the transcellular membrane potential, and the chemical potential in the movement of molecules between the intra and the extracellular compartments, are the sodium and the potassium, through what we call the sodium-potassium, as we all know, the sodium-potassium pump. But also calcium play a role in such processes, and also chlorides. So these are the major electrolytes inside the body, which include both anions and the cations. They are present in both intracellular and extracellular compartments, and the balance between the intracellular and extracellular concentrations of these electrolytes is important in keeping the electrolyte balance of the body, and in carrying out the functions of the different organs, especially the cardiac functions, the neuronal functions, and of course also the skeletal functions, and the skeletal muscle function, and the visceral functions, including the visceral muscle function and the visceral secretion. So these electrolytes are actually very important, and really very important in regulation of the different body functions. That's why management of such electrolytes and of fluid balance is important and vital in keeping the function of the different organs and system constant and in balance, in both, as I mentioned, in both health and disease. And the most common fluid disorder is hypovolemia. And the most common electrolyte disorder is hyponatremia. Fluid imbalance or fluid balance disorders include